We want to welcome our state Senator Shelley Mayer, our state Assemblyman Steve Otis, and our county legislator Catherine Parker to talk about what's going on in each of their worlds and how it affects our community. So thank you all for joining us. We're also going to ask you to raise hands if you have questions rather than putting the questions into the chat. We don't want to miss any of them. So if you could just please raise your hand when you've got a question. As Mitch gets the hands raised, they come in order and he will ask the questions, unmute you, and go ahead, ask your question, and let's get moving. Thank you all. Who's going first? Have we decided?
I'll be happy to go first. Good morning, everyone. Steve has arranged for us to be in this really beautiful assembly chamber, not chamber, it's a conference room. And you get a sense of really how beautiful and special Albany is, which is always a good reminder. I always encourage it pre-COVID and post-COVID for people to come and visit. The building is closed right now. I'm going to speak briefly. I'm not sure how long you want us to go, Peggy, before we pass it on.
I would say 10 minutes each, please.
Okay. I'm going to, as the chair of the Senate Education Committee, I'm going to speak primarily about education. That's my number one issue. And then, but a number of other issues, including flooding as well. And then Steve and I will sort of play off each other as we usually do. On education, we continue to have a historic investment in public education, which occurred last year, where we were able to get then Governor Cuomo to agree that we would fully fund foundation aid. The formula that was built into the law in 2007 as a result of the CFE lawsuit. And it meant that every school district in the state would get, over a period of time, the 100% of the amount that was owed them. Some of the districts in my district, including Portchester and New Rochelle, were substantially below their 60% of foundation aid. Last year, we got up to 60%. This year, the governor has agreed with us, and we are proposed to get to 80%, and next year, 100%. And that would give us really the money that was owed. And for two of the districts here, Mamaroneck, it will this year, if the governor's budget is adopted, would get up to 83.5% of the foundation aid owed, and Rhinebeck to 80.9%. And every district will get at least 2 to 3% more under the governor's proposal. This was a huge win for us in the education space, particularly during COVID. We were also able to get the federal money that came from the federal CRSA and the American Rescue Plan to go directly to schools. That was very important as we try to bring schools back from COVID, which has been a tremendous challenge. And I want to commend all the districts that are covered here for really remarkable work and flexibility. Not that it's over, we're still dealing with it. Some other things that the governor proposed that we are dealing with is a fairly substantial increase in a program she calls RECOVS. It's $100 million for mental health, social and emotional and mental health of our students recovering from school. It's a matching grant. I don't think it's perfect for our district because it does require you have to match it with federal funds, and some of our districts have already used their federal funds. But bottom line, we have to invest in social and emotional health for our students recovering from school. And this is a good start. We're going to work from this and move forward. Pre-COVID, I was able to get $10 million in the budget for mental health in our schools, and that money never got out the door. So one of my, certainly one of my priorities this year is to make sure that money gets out the door. And I do want to mention that working with Governor Hochul and her team is a real game changer for us up here, because we have a partner and we have someone, while we may not always agree, we are in a much more collaborative space, working closely, working with the agencies. It's a notable difference to all of us in the legislature to have someone who is actually interested in working with us and not fighting us. So I want to mention that. In addition to the substantial commitment to foundation aid and additional money for schools, one of the things that had happened in prior years is the governor tried to cut the capital reimbursement for school districts. And that was always something that the legislature had to restore. That's reimbursable, whether you're spending money on school buses, whether you're spending money on computer software. There was always an effort to reduce that. This year, the governor has agreed we will continue to pay basically at the formula reimbursement level what school districts incur in terms of capital expenses, and that's particularly important. Another thing very important to us in the Senate and in the Assembly is to increase pre-K. You know, in New York City, if you're 4 years old, you're entitled to full-day pre-K. In Westchester, it depends on your district, it depends on your, sometimes your income level. I am very committed to having full-day pre-K in every district that wants it. I think it is absolutely essential for having children be ready for kindergarten. And also, the world has changed from the day of half-day pre-K when so many basically parents were home or mothers were home. So we are investing in expanding full-day pre-K. We're going to make a continued push, given the needs of all of our students to have kindergarten preparedness. We are going to continue to push for full-day pre-K. Another issue I want to mention briefly is the governor's proposal is a substantial investment in SUNY and CUNY. This is extremely important for us. So many of our students graduate high school and go to SUNY schools. Enrollment has been down in COVID, but we think that it will continue to come back up. This is the affordable choice for many of our students, and we have to continue to make it affordable and high quality. And I think there's a substantial commitment by this governor and by the legislature to continue to invest in higher education. Again, we have our differences with the governor, but we're starting in a far better place in terms of commitment to school funding across the board, including special ed. And during COVID particularly, I've been very mindful of the challenges for our special ed students.
Uh-oh, looks like we've lost Shelley. Steve, could we bounce to you perhaps and go back to Shelley when she comes back on? Steve, can you hear us?
Sure. Hello, friends. Nice to see everybody. And we'll restore Shelley's picture shortly. But as Shelley indicated, we are actually in the Assembly Democratic Conference Room in the state capitol, a room that Shelley and I have both spent a lot of time in. And so we thought this was a comfortable location. I decided not to use my usual COVID virtual background of the diner, which I pride myself on having the diner background. But we are here. It's budget season in the legislative session, so things are very busy with many of the issues that Shelley touched upon, and I'm on the Education Committee and the Assembly as well. One thing to note on foundation aid, which is something that we both worked very hard on, both the Mamaroneck and Rhinebeck school districts are going to be receiving this year in the governor's proposal a 30% increase in foundation aid. And there'll be another big increase next year because we made a 3-year commitment to get to 100%, but that's a nice jump for both districts. What I'd like to do is talk about some of the things that I'm working on right now in this session that are exciting. One of them is continued progress on the front of clean water. And Governor Hochul has proposed another $500 million installment in terms of clean water programs for the state. The biggest portion of that is the grant program that I helped create in 2015. Money has gone to every community on the Sound Shore and to communities all over the state. So far, that program has delivered $1.6 billion in grants to local governments. Shelley and I and Catherine have been very involved in the flood recovery issues and understanding the different flood challenges that Mamaroneck has and other communities have. And we are very excited about the news from Senator Schumer, Congressman Bowman, and Senator Gillibrand about the federal government taking our Mamaroneck flood project, and instead of it being in shares, the federal government is going to pay the entire $88 million share, which saves the village about 12.5%, the county about 12.5%, the state about 25%, that New York taxpayers would have had to pay for in some form more directly. And that's a big win. Kudos to also our state partners at DEC and Governor Hochul in this effort, and to Mayor Tom Murphy, who worked very hard advocating, especially after Ida. We still have a lot of work to do, and we want to get the shovels in the ground, and we've been working very hard to have that happen as soon as possible as well. But in addition to the recovery and that plan, I have a proposal that I succeeded in getting in the environmental bond issue in 2020 that has been moved to 2022 for a new grant program for stormwater projects. And one thing that we found out in Ida, a lot of the flooding wasn't near a waterway. A lot of the flooding was, and this was true certainly in Larchmont and other parts of the community not near waterways, is either a failed stormwater system or a stormwater system in locations that does not have adequate capacity. So as we did with clean water, let's have a stormwater grant program that gets money to local governments to help pay for that. We have it in the Bond Act proposal already. I'm trying to get that amount of money increased and maybe some fresh money in this state budget. Shelley and I also have been working with DEC and with a federal agency on a new source of funding for buyouts of properties where there's some properties that are just totally untenable, and the village of Mamaroneck has filed the beginning of that process. So outside of the 88 million, there may be some other buyout funds at locations where a property owner wants to take advantage of that. Another big issue for me last year and this year is digital inclusion. And especially in Mamaroneck and Larchmont, if you're aware of the work of STEM Alliance and what Meg Koifer has been doing throughout Westchester and Yonkers and many other communities, but centered in Larchmont and Mamaroneck, digital inclusion is a special kind of program to take people who don't have digital literacy, usually deprived on the basis of race, economic status, geography, and age, and provide them the digital access, a laptop or computer, and the training component to get them up to speed so that they can take advantage of the education, job search, health access, all the other things that many of us who are on a Zoom today probably take for granted. I am working with a coalition of advocates in this area around the state, and also a national group to try and grow this in New York State, and a major priority of mine in the budget, and trying to make sure New York takes full advantage of new federal funding in the infrastructure bill that can go to digital inclusion programs, which is one of the great equity issues that we have to resolve, because people are living in two different worlds without digital literacy. Another issue that I am working on this session is one of the climate change issues, which is, in fact, we're having a hearing Thursday of this week on a better rollout of electric vehicle charging stations. All the auto manufacturers are talking about really ramping up their availability of electric vehicles in their fleets. And we have to have the charging infrastructure locally and workplace settings, in public settings, and when one travels, so that people will feel comfortable buying electric vehicles. No state, I've spoken to people across the country, no state is up to speed on this. And in the Assembly, we are very determined to press this session as one of the key climate change actions that we can take. Transportation-related air pollution is a major greenhouse gas contributor, and if we're going to meet our climate change goals, we have to accelerate our move to electric. I'll also mention another climate change-related issue that I'm very involved with, really two of the leading people in the Assembly on the issue of the arcane world of what is called proof of work cryptocurrency mining. And you're asking, what the hell is that? It doesn't relate to all cryptocurrency, but there are some forms of cryptocurrency that when they authenticate transactions, they've chosen a method called proof of work that uses a tremendous amount of energy. They're opening old coal power plants that have been closed and restarting them up to generate this energy to perform this function. This is an international issue. It has been stopped in some countries and being looked at in Congress, and Elizabeth Warren is looking at some of these issues. But we need to make sure that New York does not forfeit our ability to meet our climate change goals by allowing what is an unnecessary form of cryptocurrency verification when there are other alternatives available. So I'm going to stop there. I think we're going to hear from our colleague Catherine, and questions and answers. But those are some of the hot issues I'm working on this session, and very excited for 2022 and to make progress on issues this year as we have all in the past. Catherine?
Good morning, everyone. And before I start, since I see that our state senator has been able to rejoin us, Shelley, do you want to pick up where you left off before I start? I see you trying.
Now she's okay.
There you go. Do you want to go ahead or?
Oh, I just want to mention two things. Thank you, Catherine. Very briefly, just to dovetail with some of the things Steve said. On flooding, I think my view is that New York State is not at the top of its game on flood recovery. I think we saw that in Ida. And besides working with Steve on actual dollar recovery for our constituents, I've proposed a number with Steve of bills to address the way we deal with flooding, including having basically a flood czar with best practices, because it seems to me we need that. We need someone who's really in charge as opposed to a multiplicity of agencies. So that is one thing. Secondly, I'm proposing a Hurricane Ida relief fund to give partial reimbursement for people who through FEMA really got so little of their actual loss recovered. I think the state should have some kind of fund where if you can verify loss, we should do that. We're also adding, proposing a bill to add someone who's a technical expert in flood mitigation to the Building Codes Council, so that the building code, the state's building code really is updated with a flood mentality, which clearly we need to do. And with respect to buyouts, which Steve mentioned, which is a very hot topic for a number of people whose homes are really no longer livable. We are pursuing every avenue, including federal and state money, to see how we can have a system where when this happens and homes are no longer habitable, we have a way to buy them out at pre-flood cost. I mean, these people that we saw, and Peggy knows this, we saw them all over our districts, had houses that were worth $700,000 before Ida and $200,000 after Ida, and through no fault of their own. We have a system that's just not as up to date with the propensity towards flooding after as a result of climate change. So I am really pushing legislatively to push New York to be on the forward side of that, as opposed to on the solely responsive side. And Steve has been a great partner working with our county legislative colleagues, and George, we are really all on the same page with our federal counterparts. Lastly, and I'm sorry, Catherine, I just want to mention this, I'm very committed to a bill to restructure the way long-term care insurance is provided and funded. People are having enormous increases in their premiums. There's very little oversight. Again, New York is not up to speed with the rest. And for many of us for whom this is not so far off in the future, we want long-term care insurance. We don't want to be forced to lose all our assets and go on Medicaid. And yet these premiums are really out of control with very little oversight. So I'm working hard on that, as well as a number of other consumer-related issues, including the increase in costs at Con Ed. So I'll stop there, Catherine. Thank you for letting me go.
Sure, no problem. So good morning, everyone. I'm going to pick up a little bit where we left off when County Executive George Latimer spoke to everybody in December, which was during our budget season. And I think he was at that point delivering what our intent was to vote in the budget. So a budget generally is a good snapshot of the goals and the mission for an elective body for the course of the year. And I think it's worth noting that the budget for Westchester County, I think, was an amazing document. One, it really shows that our financial house is in order. Our reserves are at a very healthy level. For the first time in a very, very long time. We were able also to give the taxpayer a pretty significant tax cut of $7 million. When you add that to the previous tax cuts from the year before and the year before that, that really amounts to about a 15% tax cut on your county portion of your property tax bill. So that's no small feat, and I think that that's gives some relief to the homeowners. But what else we did was we really put a lot of money towards very important programs for Westchester. We've had discussions at the summit on affordable housing. Westchester County has traditionally had a fund of about $25 million annually to work with communities to help incentivize affordable housing. We doubled that number to $50 million, which I think is, again, tremendous and really shows that we are very intent on helping communities tackle the situation of affordable housing. We also put $25 million in the budget for economic development. And that is a number that really shows, again, we are really trying to make Westchester a place that is welcoming to business, highlight businesses that are here, highlight opportunities for our workforce, and also provide educational programs so that we have a really skilled workforce in place to, again, continue to attract more businesses. You're going to see an email from me very shortly, I think probably by the end of the day, that is highlighting a program that we have, again, a workforce training program for one of our new manufacturers, a manufacturer that is now based in Westchester, had been based in the San Francisco area, brought jobs to Westchester in the last couple of years, and is looking to grow that business. So we are really happy to help continue to grow that a business like that is providing good jobs with we're not talking minimum wage opportunities, and really making Westchester a very livable place, where we really have everything here. So that's the highlights of the budget. Specifically for my district, I put in money for the Army Corps project. I am so thrilled that our federal partners have come through, so we don't need to have that allocation of $11 million for the county's portion of the Army Corps project. But we really are intent on working with our municipalities on other flood mitigation. We have had a fund of about $25 million for flood mitigation projects. We've had that actually going back to the time of County Executive Spano. But there's more that we know that we need to do. And then more recently, since we started our new term January 1, we've hit the ground running. So just last night, we had our board meeting where we passed our state legislative package. What the state legislative package is, it's a group of requests and support of different bills that are happening at the state level. And I want to thank our state representatives, Steve and Shelley, because we supported much of the great work that they've been doing post Ida. So there were a number of bills that the two of them have been carrying that really, spoke to looking at building codes for flood victims. We support the idea that we need to have something at the statewide level on that. Another piece of legislation that actually doesn't have to do with flooding that we thought was really worthwhile supporting is allowing Westchester to set their own fees for gun permits. And I know that that's carried by both Steve and Shelley for the Assembly and the Senate. And we appreciate that you're carrying that bill. And so we sent, that was one of the pieces that we are supporting as well. In addition to that, at the end of our last term, I had introduced legislation to create a law in Westchester where if a landlord had a premises that had been flooded at any time during the last 10 years, that they would have to disclose to future tenants when those flood events happened and to what extent the actual measure of what that water was within the premises, because we know that we have had situations where people have been in a flooded basement or first floor apartment where they had no idea that water was potentially going to be over their heads. And we think that that's very important for public safety to require that. And then, it's up to the individual if they want to go through with that lease and if they feel like they have such a great deal, it actually gives some coverage to the landlord as well, that, somebody's going in with eyes wide open to that situation. So I reintroduced that for this term. And I think that my colleagues, many of my colleagues have signed on to that. So we will be seeing that probably within the first couple of months of this term. And then lastly, last night, we also passed the hazard mitigation plan, which with the exception of 2 municipalities in Westchester, 41 municipalities submitted very detailed information on how they want to work with the county to really ensure public safety for all their residents, what they need to focus on, and the areas that are very important within their districts. And so we passed that last night as well. I think that's going to be, again, one of the things during this term post Ida that we're really looking at opportunities to help other communities. And I will leave it at that and open it up for questions.
Mitch, I'm going to ask you to handle the questions in the order in which they've been raised.
Okay, we have one question, let's see, from Nina Riccio. And let's see. Well, you know what? I'm going to start with Susan Goldberg. Susan Goldberg says, discuss the particular redrawing of congressional districts.
You wanted to jump in here?
Please.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about redistricting state and Assembly, Senate, and Congress. And I know Susan Goldberger, you're asking about Congress particularly and the Sound Shore, and understandably. So just to restate the process though, New York State has a provision in the state constitution that set up a new system really of redistricting. We adopted a so-called independent redistricting commission evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. They were to draw two sets of maps. The first set of maps, they were theoretically to agree upon for Senate, Assembly, and Congress based on the 2020 census. They could not agree on the first set of maps, and you may recall the Republicans and Democrats each submitted separate maps for Senate, Assembly, and Congress based on thousands of hours of testimony that this commission took. Those initial sets of maps were rejected by the Senate and Assembly. Then they were to submit a second set of maps. They could not agree even to having a meeting jointly, and so they did not submit a second set of maps. Under the provision in the Constitution, if they are unable or unwilling to prepare and submit to the legislature a second set of maps, the legislature was authorized and in fact directed to draw its own set of maps, which is what happened, and they were adopted for the Senate, Assembly, and Congress. One other point I want to make, though, in the constitutional provision that I'm talking about, there is express language, which was not there before, that says that the maps cannot be drawn for partisan advantage, which frankly wasn't the case before. They were drawn for partisan advantage. It says the maps cannot be drawn to favor an incumbent. Prior to this, they absolutely were drawn to favor incumbents. So there are new sort of overarching good government principles at work here. They have not been litigated to be interpreted by the courts. Putting that aside, now we are in a position where we have a congressional district that includes much of the Sound Shore. It is merged with a lot of Long Island that is primarily shore driven. In other words, it is largely a suburban district of Nassau, Suffolk, and the Sound Shore communities of Westchester. Steve will go through the percentages, but the bottom line is because the population growth has been downstate and the population loss upstate, as well as the fact that New York lost a congressional seat because of the census, as there additional seats were created downstate, it pushed the existing seats up north through Westchester, basically to encompass additional geographic areas as a result of the change in population. So sort of everything was pushed upstate as new seats were created downstate. This seat that was created, Congressional District 3, which affects the Sound Shore, appears to be an open seat. And Steve and I have very much committed and have already started this in ensuring that every candidate of any party who seeks to have this seat pays attention and is attentive to the issues of the Westchester portion of this district, and particularly, obviously, all of our Sound Shore communities. And we have started with that. We are going to continue to do that. And I would point out that apparently one of the other choices was to have much more of a New York City focused district, with Westchester sort of being an add-on. And apparently the decision was to make it more of a suburban district. There is a little portion of the Bronx and Queens that connects Nassau, Suffolk, and Westchester, but basically this is a suburban district. It is not ideal from my point of view. It is what it is, and we are going to make our voices heard to ensure that Sound Shore residents are heard by every candidate, and then whoever is elected by that person as well. But Steve may want to add something.
Well, Shelley gave a very good description of how we got there. There was an advocacy group in the city that had earlier proposed some sort of Sound Shore district, and maybe that's how the map writers came up with this. But the district is 18% Westchester, 4% the Bronx, 11% Queens, and then 65% in the 30s for Nassau, the rest for Suffolk. And it basically is a horseshoe along the shores of all of those jurisdictions. And so it really is truly a coastal district. But we are determined to make sure they pay attention to Westchester. One of the things that Shelley and I both were very upset about and did not happen was one of the earlier plans split the village of Mamaroneck in two and split the town of Mamaroneck in two in a way which would have been very marginalizing for the Sound Shore. It also split the Sound Shore in two. And historically, we have had a Sound Shore congressional district, except for 10 years ago, we sort of Portchester got moved to a different district, is now reconnected to the Sound Shore. We've had a primarily Sound Shore State Senate district for many years, and that continues, and a primarily Sound Shore Assembly district. And I think that serves our needs with the community of interest that is shared by communities along the Sound Shore. So we're gonna stay at it, and I'm sure the county also will play a role in making sure that the people running for that congressional seat pay attention to Westchester County in a robust way.
Let's hear from Nina, because she has that.
I just would add, that while our Senate and Assembly seats were also redrawn for the next election, both Steve and I basically continue to represent the communities we have. My district, which was originally gerrymandered to make sure George Latimer didn't win, but he did win, went all the way from the Bronx border to Bedford. The northern part of the district is now, will be in the district that's currently represented by Senator Harcum. And so I will have a less gerrymandered, more communities of interest district, which will include the Sound Shore, I'm happy to say, in presuming we get reelected. Thank you.
I think we should hear from Nina, because she has the question from the students. Nina?
Mitch, can you unmute Nina, please?
Am I okay?
You
Can I
are.
hear it? Okay.
Yep.
Actually, I just typed it, not all that well, but let me read it to you. And this came from the Mamaroneck High School Okra students who are working on, have been working on the project of advocacy for tenants in eviction proceedings. So the question they have is that the governor's state budget has allocated $35 million for providing legal representation for tenants in eviction proceedings, at the same time that Westchester County is considering legislation that would guarantee representation for these tenants. How are the state and county communicating to ensure that the state funding is secured in the budget and able to be properly allocated to support Westchester's future policy?
Well, let me just jump in to say that kudos to Okra for really taking the lead. I mean, as someone who cares about civics and education, I couldn't ask for, none of us could ask for more than what we have in Mr. Liberti's class and these Okra students. So yes, the governor proposed with a modest and frankly inadequate amount for statewide representation for tenants in eviction proceedings. The Westchester County appears to be moving ahead, and credit to the county board and to George for making a commitment to do this. This is a job of state legislators to make sure that the money that the governor allocates, which we have to decide and vote on, complements or supplements or works well with whatever Westchester County is prepared to do. We have to fight for Westchester County to have the money to do this. At the same time, we have to ensure that this money begins to make a commitment to a statewide, that's our obligation, a statewide provision for every tenant to be represented. And I just use this as an example because I continue to represent Yonkers. I did a survey when I was in the assembly from Yonkers to compare the per capita rate of eviction between Yonkers and the Bronx. Yonkers had a much higher rate of per capita eviction given the number of cases brought, simply because the Bronx had a guaranteed right of counsel to every tenant. And this is in the interest of landlords as well, because you're able to negotiate settlements that allow for either partial payment, a time for the person to move on, you reduce homelessness. This is a no-brainer solution, and the city of New York has it. The rest of the state needs it. Kudos to the county, but we will make sure that we get as much state money as possible to make it possible in Westchester.
I would just add that it's been a hodgepodge historically. I know that we in the legislature have gotten funding to specific groups that provide legal services to try and fill the gaps in the Hudson Valley, and that has done part of the job, but we need a more blanket solution for people, and especially with many property owners getting very aggressive about trying to move people out. And the difference, as Shelley said, is legal representation changes the whole equation and provides some fairness to the process. So kudos to the question and the Okra group. The students come up with new, it seems like new issues every month. So congratulations.
And I'll just add that at the Board of Legislators, we've recognized for a very long time that it really is good financial sense for the government to step in and help fund right to counsel. We support that and have been working diligently on trying to get something passed. But in the meantime, we have also been funding the great work of some of our nonprofit partners who are doing that work today. In fact, we have been funding it to the tune of about $20 million. We even opened an office or helped to open an office in Yonkers, because Yonkers and Mount Vernon are areas where there has been significant eviction proceedings. And so that office is right there. Somebody who is, getting in the court system can walk in and get some help. And we recognize that if we're spending $20 million on the state level to have a $35 million fund, that really just tells you that it's not enough. So we do, it was one of our items in the state package that we support the idea of statewide right to counsel, but we would love to see that as a robust program.
Thank you, Mitch. I'm going to ask you to pick up the 4 participants excuse me, who've raised their hands first, and then we'll go to the chat for questions.
Let's go to the chat questions. Maybe Karen Kaur has a question.
Yes, hi. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Karen Kaur. I'm a parent at the Mamaroneck School District, and also a co-chair of the Town of Mamaroneck Sustainability Collaborative. I've been involved in the school district in helping to promote sustainable practices. So I have a question regarding education and environment. My question is that with New York State's very ambitious climate legislation, I'm wondering, whether we can get more help, whether there is funding, maybe that I don't know of, for our public school districts to be at the forefront of taking climate action, so that they're not only teaching them about climate change and sustainability issues in the classroom, but they're actually leaders practicing operationally on ground, so that they are they are also at the forefront, because as we all know, schools are so important as leaders in transforming behavior in our communities. And as we have seen from our Okra students, our students demand action, right? And they want to be part of the solution.
Just ask the question. Just ask.
So my question is that possible? I mean, is there funding by the state for our public schools to have sustainability coordinators who can facilitate and who can coordinate sustainability practices in the school districts? Thank you.
So Karen, let me jump in. The governor did propose 2 very specific things on electric vehicles for cars. She proposed requiring new school buses to have zero emissions by 2027 and current ones by 2035, and to modify the transportation aid, that's the reimbursement for electric buses, including purchasing, leasing for 10 years, and charging stations. So with respect to electric school buses, she began the commitment, which I think we all share. Schools are a place where a lot of money is spent, and there is an opportunity to really make change by using that money in a sustainable way. There's not a proposal to help fund sustainability coordinators. However, I would point out, schools got a huge amount of money last year from the federal government. It is targeted at COVID recovery. Schools have the opportunity to use money as they see fit, but this is the beginning of a very strong commitment. In fact, we have to change behaviors in schools, I agree with you, to make sustainability part of the ethos of schools. So we're starting with the school buses in her proposal, but there's certainly more we can do, and we can consider funding sustainability coordinators. Also, it could be something that's done on a volunteer basis until we have the funding. But we're moving ahead in this direction, and it's a good first step.
I'll also add that on the food scrap issue, which you mentioned in your written question, many school districts, and some of this has been going on in Mamaroneck, have been trying to get into the food scrap space. A few years ago, I was chair of an assembly panel on solid waste management. And food waste is one of the untapped areas where we can divert material from the waste stream instead of it going to Peekskill to get burned. And Westchester County is actually expanding their assistance to municipal food scrap programs as well. But schools have actually a special ability and or businesses to deal with food scraps. Schools also, I raised this at one of the budget hearings, schools have an ability to access state funding to do more solar on flat rooftops and take advantage of that to get us to a better place in terms of climate change. And there's actually a special state program to assist school districts in making that solar transition. So there's a lot going on. And I think that when school districts do that, that becomes a lesson to the students as well when they see that in action. So keep up your good work, and we're all in this together. Shelley, Catherine, and I are big on these types of issues.
And I will just say, Mamaroneck schools have been amazing. You know, the programs that Steve and Shelley have talked about, the K-Solar program, the food scrap program, you've been doing this for a number of years. So it's really tremendous. I think you don't have busing, but as Shelley's right, that is a major game changer for a lot of school districts in other parts of the state, as another opportunity to really, show that, they're putting their money where their mouth is as far as investing in clean technology. So anyway, I would say without having a sustainability coordinator, the folks in Mamaroneck are really doing a great job on that already.
Next question from the raised hands, please.
The next question we have is from Margaret Coffer.
Hi, this is Meg. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good morning. Thanks so much for your time today and for everything that's been shared so far. I represent the STEM Alliance, a local nonprofit, as you all know, and we work very much in the digital equity space. And we really understand that creating equal digital opportunities for people, including tech skills and devices, not just broadband and infrastructure access, but the actual skills and tools to use that access, is an economic driver. And so when we talk about the social services that people need, they won't need those services if they can get higher demand jobs and higher wages. And so my question is, first of all, the county has given us support. We're very grateful. And we're seeing federal monies that will be coming, but those aren't going to come for another 18 to 24 months. And ultimately, they're going to come to the places that have stated that digital equity as a precursor of workforce development is critical. And I wanted to know where the county and where you all as our representatives are taking actions around not just broadband and infrastructure, but programs that seek digital inclusion, skills, and device access.
Well, I'll start. Meg, you have really been amazing with being on the forefront of sort of raising this, conscious raising for all of us in elected office. So I'm glad that the county, we've stepped up. I think this is our second year funding your program, and you have been growing the program and working in different communities where there's a real need for this. I think until that federal funding comes, probably, I know Steve's been working on something for you for a while, and maybe that's closer to coming to fruition. But we are, really happy to partner with you, and the work is so important. You're 100% correct that I see this as being a way that really helps level the playing field and prepares, as I talked about economic development, it really helps to prepare a skilled workforce.
And Meg, thank you for all that you do on this across the state. I think the key element here is a lot of the broadband discussion is focused on broadband mapping, getting funding to ISP providers, and even trying to get people low cost internet service, without the understanding that if you don't provide the digital inclusion piece, you're not going to get the job done. And so this is what, with your help, Meg, what I've been advocating with state agency officials to try and move it to the place we need it to be to deal with the digital divide. And I am very optimistic. I've had some good discussions in the last few days, and I think we're going to be able to get the focus where we want it to be. And the other thing is, for digital inclusion programs, they are best delivered by very local groups, very local not-for-profits, libraries, senior centers, groups that already have, in a sense, the clients where they've identified we need digital literacy help. And so I think part of the mission is understanding that, getting the understanding of that model to be accepted by all of the players that are looking at these bigger broadband issues, and understanding that the local nature of this is indispensable to a real solution. But I'm on the road, we're on the road, we're going to get the job done. So thank you, Meg.
We have
I'll just add very brief.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll just add very briefly that my focus on this has been in career and technical education, and ensuring that our community colleges and our high schools that are doing CTE are actually preparing students for jobs that exist, higher paying jobs that involve digital preparedness and digital knowledge. And we haven't done well enough. I raised it with the Commissioner of Labor. We spend money on these career programs. I'm not convinced they do the job in terms of digital preparedness for the higher tech jobs. I've seen this in Brooklyn. There are good models out there. And so thank you, Meg, for your incredible leadership. But we're pushing on a number of fronts here to get closer to this.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 questions left. If we have time, I'd like to bring Robert Leaf into the session. Robert.
Robert, can you speak? Then let's.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Great, wonderful, thank you. My name is Robert Leaf. I'm an owner of an apartment complex in Westchester, and I wanted to find out about ERAP. Are there still funds? When do they expect the funds to be out? can people still apply? Does it make any sense for a landlord to even accept an application if there are no funds going to be available?
I'll start off. Yeah. So on a great question. The initial ERAP funds have been committed, and the governor is seeking additional funding from the federal government towards that. There are some other programs with all state money, about, I think, 140 million to deal with situations that didn't necessarily fall into the ERAP program, to get money to property owners that maybe had a tenant that didn't fit into the situation or didn't want to apply for ERAP. And the goal continues to be to try and get state and federal resources to property owners to make them whole as best we can. So they are still taking applications, but they have to find a way to backfill the money. And I think that'll also be part of our budget process discussion that's going on right now, to see if we can get some more state funds in there while we're waiting for answers from the federal government.
Okay, we have one final question from Carolyn Gerosa.
Good morning. Hi. Thank you so much for your time. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I was just wondering, every time we hear from Governor Hochul, she alludes to alleviating the mask mandate, but always saying that the kids will be likely to stay masked in school. And other people are releasing these mandates, and our numbers for infection and hospitalization and deaths are way down. Our vaccination rates are the highest in the state. So I was wondering if you can give any insight as to what we can do, what you all are doing to help fight for our kids, and what you think she's looking for in terms of some kind of a threshold, and what the timeline realistically you think looks like.
Well, let me jump in, Carolyn. I've been raising with the governor's office for at least the last month and a half the need to have metrics to give parents guidance. When will we be at a statistically legitimate period to eliminate the mask mandate in schools? I'm very, very sympathetic. All of us as parents understand the tremendous challenge it has been, and now the feeling like we've reached this point. And New Jersey just did it, although the elimination of mask mandates does not occur till March in New Jersey, notwithstanding that the mandate was lifted. I believe the governor is going to give guidance tomorrow on mask issues outside of the school context, but I did raise with her specifically in person last night, and her staff again, that parents need to know when we will be able to eliminate this in schools. I am hopeful she's going to give us some sense. She is meeting with school stakeholders today, including the statewide PTA, to have further conversations. So I think the voices of parents, certainly I hear it loud and clear from around the state as the chair of this committee. You should make sure that you do email all of us as well as the governor's office to let them know that your own views about how continuation of the mask mandate affects your children, and your sense that safety will be protected, because she's not going to walk away from what she thinks is the best science. She's very clear on that. So, but that being said, I think there is a path. I hope it is soon. And the voices of parents have certainly been heard, but keep your voice up.
I would also add that I think as we're looking at this across the country, there is a desire to have, and I think school districts in Westchester are saying, give us a metric that we can work with. And I think what is going to happen, I hope in very shortly, and we did hear from the governor yesterday on this, is that the requirement will be lifted, but it is also likely that in some places, if rates go up and there's an outbreak, school districts are going to have to take actions to respond to that. And so it's going to be a little see how we go. And as it's been in the case of the pandemic throughout, we're always surprised about what happens, and we should be not shocked that we don't necessarily know what the next curve in the road is. It would seem that right now all the infection rates are going down, and what school districts need, we've spoken to the superintendents, school board members, they want some guidance, clear guidance, give us a metric that we can respond to and go one way or another based upon something that makes health sense. So we are following this closely in the Assembly as well, and very concerned that we have a rational policy. From what the governor indicated, I think we're going to see some steps in the upcoming days. So thank you for the good question, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Elaine, we could go on with questions, but I think we're running out of time.
Unfortunately, I promised our panel too that we'd end on time so they can get back to work. So I want to thank Catherine, Steve, Shelley, and certainly Peggy as well, and our LMC staff for this morning. I hope all of you enjoyed the session today and got some of your questions answered. I know we never can have time to do all the questions. And I hope we see you next month on March 8th, when we're going to be talking about healthy lawns, what we can do to keep our lawns and our communities healthy next month. So see you then, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Peggy.